And we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a stream. I hope you're having a nice beginning of the week. I'm happy to welcome you back for another interview, but this time not with a member of the European Parliament, but with another interview and something big, actually, tonight. So we will discuss about the controversial topic of lobbying. So before I introduce you to our guest, let's specify a bit what we call lobbying. So what is lobbying? As all things in the EU, it has an official definition. The EU loves definitions. So under EU law, it's defined as all activities carried out with the objective of influencing the policy formulation and decision-making processes of the European institutions. So in a way that you could understand it, or that anyone outside the bubble could understand, the idea is if you do anything to influence what EU institutions do, that's lobbying. That's the short version of it. Brussels is well known for being a capital of lobbying. It is the second biggest. It has the second biggest concentration of lobbyists in the world after Washington. So that means that in practice you can count between 30 and 40,000 lobbyists in Brussels if you include lobbying in all its different shape and forms. And over time, lobbying has become and lobbyists have become kind of a mystical figure. Like whenever someone speaks about Europe, the European Union, or even politics in general, I'm sure you have this discussion in your respective countries, lobbying will quickly come on the table. And lobbyists are often used as in public speech as a way to create rejection and to imply even corruption. So I think it's fair to say that lobbyists are definitely not a popular profession in the popular eye. People associate it to the idea of corruption, of undue influence, opacity, and let's not kid ourselves. It's based on some true story about that. However, as always, things are not so simple and not so black and white. And actually, behind the term lobbyist, there is a very wide variety of different actors, each with different ways of doing lobbying and different interests. So you find lobbyists in companies, trade associations, NGOs, think tank, public institution, anything. Everyone needs lobbyists. And to misquote let's say a famous rule of the internet, if it exists, it probably has lobbying about it. And despite the negative public opinion on lobbying, lobbying is actually considered positively in Brussels. It's considered as something useful and needed for the EU institution. And you can be sure that it's the same in your respective country. So in France, in Germany, whenever you will have lobbying in your respective capital. So tonight we are going to see what actually a lobbyist is, what is a myth, what is true, and help you understand better one of the main actor of EU politics. So for the sake of transparency, as a bunch of you already know, after I stopped being an MEP assistant, I became a lobbyist myself. This, of course, will not influence the question that we'll ask to our guest, but some might even say that it gives me some personal insight on that because I've been on both sides of the table. But I wanted it to mention it to make sure that, well, get it out of the way and it doesn't become a drama afterwards. So as for our guest, for our discussion tonight, I invited two experienced lobbyists from different backgrounds to understand more about what lobbyists actually are and answer your questions about lobbying. So on the one hand, I have Paul Varakas, who is the president of the Society of European Affairs Professionals, and also on the side, he is the Director General of the European Cigar Manufacturer Association. My second guest is Catherine Hartmann, who is the Executive Director of the Medical Nutrition International Industry, and also an independent consultant with a vast experience in the EU health and NGO world. But so before we start the actual interview, I will shortly remind you the rules of the stream for tonight, for anyone who would be new with us for this stream. So our guests will stay with us for about an hour. After that, they will go and enjoy the rest of the evening, and you'll be stuck with me for another half an hour to do a bit of a debriefing, discuss what you thought of the interview, give you additional contextual elements, anything that you might need around the topic of tonight. As usual, I've prepared my own questions for our guests tonight, and I also collected questions from people on Reddit, on Discord, etc., etc. If you're watching this on Twitch or on YouTube, you can, of course, ask your question via the chat. I will keep an eye on it, and I will pick among your suggestions. And if you're watching it from Twitter, well, you just have to click on the link, and that will get you on Twitch or YouTube to ask your questions. So, bottom line is, don't hesitate to participate and react, but as always, don't spam and stay civil. Small but important precision. The interview tonight is only about the job of lobbyists and lobbying in general. We will not talk about, or I will not ask our guests what they lobby specifically about, for or against, as part of their respective job. They are here to give us the global picture about lobbying and what is being a lobbyist. We're not going to discuss what they personally do as a lobbyist. So keep that in mind when asking your question, because otherwise, well, I'm just going to ignore the questions that break the rules. So, I mean, that's up to you. Anyway, without further ado, let's start the interview. So, Paul, welcome, welcome, Catherine. Thank you a lot for being with us tonight. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
You listened to me do my little introduction, introduce your respective job, etc. Is there anything I forgot or about your respective profiles?
I guess, I'm over 30, so I guess there's a few things that you could say in addition to my experience, but no, I think it was a good overview.
Paul, anything on your side?
No.
Oh, we lost Paul for the sound. Okay, well, let's hopefully that the sound will come back. Otherwise, well, yeah, we will reconnect with Paul. But okay, let's start with you, Catherine. That's a good thing of having two guests. I can always have a second one to save me. Oh, welcome back, Paul. So, Catherine, what prompted you to become a lobbyist? Is that something that is a career objective of you, or is it something that you just ended up doing?
Honestly, I think if you'd ask all the lobbyists here in Brussels, they would answer the same thing: is we became lobbyists by accident almost. Most of the time it's because you believe in something and that is close to your heart and you want to defend it. And in my case, I had some knowledge in law, in EU institutions process, in the adoption of regulations, and therefore I thought that could be of help. But originally, like any ambitious 18-year-old studying law, I wanted to save the world, to be modest, and wanted to work in international relations. I did a master degree with a specialization in EU affairs, so I guess that was natural of me to end up in Brussels. But I really wanted to do more about peace building than health. So I arrived in the health sector because I was headhunted, and to run an association, which is the European Cancer Leagues at the beginning. And part of my job at the European Cancer Leagues was to do some advocacy. And so I guess I learned how to do advocacy by doing this some 20 years ago. But it was part of an overall job as an association director, more than a specialization. And then I guess by doing so, I became a specialist. And I've always worked for non-for-profit organizations, and almost only in the health sector.
Okay.
So that's how I ended up. But no, it was not a career choice. The career choice was to run associations in Europe at EU level, and to do it ethically, and in full transparency.
What about you, Paul? What's your story?
No, I think it's actually a bit fairly similar to Catherine at the beginning, that I did not plan to become a lobbyist. I did as well, study in law first and foremost, and actually I wanted to work in academia, and actually study specifically the concept of supremacy and primacy of EU law and how they conflict or how they can actually merge together sometime. And just by accident, I didn't get the funding that I wanted, and then a friend passed by just on the parking lot of the university and said, like, well, Paul, do you have something against working in the private sector? And I said, well, no, not really. And then, indeed, started there simply because from the legal studies, I thought that the mindset was a bit, narrow. And so I studied a bit after, EU affairs, where you could pick from sociology, philosophy, economy, etc., where you can kind of broaden your mind. And when I saw that you could actually have the work of advocating, of defending, that you have, of course, the basis of law per se, but to in another framework than simply the judiciary or the legal path, then I thought it would be interesting to start from there. And as well, as I guess you learn bit by bit. So from the different job and position that I had in the EU bubble, I started as a new affairs assistant. I did a traineeship in the council in the legal service. So still very legal, and then move on to a legal affairs position. And in that specific position, when I worked for the European Hunters Association, I just did actually a lot of lobbying on top of the legal positioning, etc. Mm-hmm. And it just gave me a very interesting taste of love and passion for just advocating for what you believe, but also from for work as a profession per se. And this is how I continue my path in the new bubble as a lobbyist.
And so let's stay with you, Paul. Now you're both lobbyists, but what do actually lobbyists do? What is the range of the tasks that a lobbyist is supposed to do? So, Paul, let's start with you.
Well, it's very broad. It's very broad. You gave the definition of lobbying, and to be even more precise, the definition is clearly saying that it's whether you're trying to directly influence or indirectly influence. And so, with that in mind, that really means that there is a broad range of things that you can do as a lobbyist. But if I have to, not really summarize my day, and to probably just condense what is lobbying about. Lobbying is about, sending information to the one making the decision. That's really what lobbying is about. That that there is something that is happening, in political sphere. Either you're trying to influence that political sphere and you're sending information message towards that, or of course there's already something happening and you're trying to get sending a bit more details about the impact that political, let's say, act will have on a certain sector or on people's life or etc. And so that really means that you need to know what's happening. So as a lobbyist, you do monitoring, of course, to check what are the main topic of discussion in the EU bubble. But of course, you also do a lot of drafting, position paper, prepare if you work in an association, you gather the views of your members, and then you send back this message, this common message to the decision maker. So it's a lot of drafting, it's a lot of meeting, it's a lot of explaining, and it's a lot of monitoring. And all of that, of course, it's to make sure you're fully connected, of course, is also a lot of networking, making sure that you're in touch with both decision makers, but of course also people across the EU bubble, so that do not necessarily have the power of making decision, but have a power to know, for example, to have a specific knowledge or specific information.
What about you, Catherine? Is there anything else that you want to add on what the lobbyists do actually beyond like the idea of sending information to decision makers?
I think there's a subtlety here. I fully agree with all that Paul said. The only thing which I would nuance a little bit is how do you qualify information? Because you can be selective in the information you send. You could send the things that are in your favor of your positions and ignore the things that are not so much supporting what you say, or you could send both. Typically in health associations, which is the area where I have experience, we try to be scientific. We have to be evidence-based. So sometimes we are a bit late in our lobbying activities because we're still collecting evidence. So it can be quite political, where you just state what your position is. And it can be both political and scientific, where it's more complicated because the science is always more nuanced and maybe data is not available at the time when, you need to be lobbying. So it's on the definition of information, where it can be more subtle in the things we do, but indeed we try to carry forward the information we have at the time that we have, that is preferably in our favor, and to the ones we know we need to make a decision, and in addition to what Paul said, and to the people we know will influence the people who will make decisions. So in the case of health, it's not simply about us writing to MEPs, but it's also making sure that patients, health professionals, the wider community sends the same message to the MEPs or member states representatives or the commission. So it's not only direct contact, but it's also using other contacts to repeat our own messages, if of course they agree with us.
Mm-hmm. And still with you, Catherine, what would you say are the qualities of a good lobbyist?
A good lobbyist is a good listener first, is good in monitoring, in making sure, and monitoring is sometimes difficult because not all information is public. It's a lot of legwork, the famous Thursday Plux meetings, at the bars. For those of you who are not from the Brussels bubble, there is traditionally on Thursday evenings, MEPs assistants and sometimes even the MEPs themselves going out to the bar, Place du Luxembourg, which is the main square outside the European Parliament, and they start talking. And if you're a good lobbyist, you're there as well, and you listen, or you even participate to the conversation. So, first and foremost, you need to be aware, and by any means, of what is going on. So public and not so public. And secondly, you need to be a good communicator. So you need to be able to articulate your points and your stance very clearly, both for the specialist and for the non-specialist, so the public at large. And you need to adapt your message to the public you're speaking to. So you can be an expert and using the jargon for policymakers, but then, making it simple to understand for the public at large, which you might seek support from. And thirdly, you need to be aware of what you can say publicly and what you need to keep for one-to-one conversations. So you might want to go to an MEP, and knowing what this MEP specific interests are, and tailor your message to his or her interest, and then for your public communication, be broader, be more general. These are, I think, maybe the three main assets of a good lobbyist.
What would you say, Paul, on your side? Any additional qualities that a good lobbyist should have?
No, not necessarily. I think that's that really sums it up. The listening, I fully agree. I think that this is mainly what a lot of people are probably lacking, is just indeed just to listen. When you have a one-to-one meeting and where you're the one even that is supposed to present your position, the most important is probably to listen to the answer and not trying to push your point all the time. That's definitely the first one. And the second one, as Catherine says, just to be articulate and to be to the point. I think that there's also, there are some decision makers, of course, more specialized than others, especially when they are, experts or technicians. But there is still the chunk, really, of the decision makers in Brussels are generalists. So if you're not able to send and communicate a simple message and a short, simple message, then I think this is really something that you need to press, is really just to focus on this short and simple message.
And still with you, Paul, something that Catherine already mentioned a bit is the idea that you need to know about information, that things that are public but also not necessarily public. So a question that I got from people on Reddit is, how do lobbyists stay on top of developments that happen, everything that happens in Brussels, because there's always 10,000 things happening at the same time. So what kind of tools does a lobbyist use to stay informed about things, whether tools, services? What are the tools of the trade, so to say?
Sure. I think I'll start with the, let's say the plain one and the one that are, to understand. Of course, if you are an association or if you are, in-house as well, you might either do the work in-house, which is really to have someone that collects the information that exists, compared to what a lot of people might think about the EU. The EU is actually quite transparent. It's just that the information is everywhere. And that's one of its main problem, of course. But one is to really collect what exists out there. So you can do that in-house, and you can also, outsource this to a consultancy or to, a private consultant that will do that work for you. Let's say that's really if you want to be just knowing on top of things. But really, if you really want to know what's happening, then you need to connect with the people that knows. And that can be, of course, directly, and that means that you would get regular social encounters. So as Catherine mentioned, of course, if you go to Place de Luxembourg, but if you go to just lunch or coffee with people that might work on the file or might know what's happening on the file as well, you will see that in Brussels there are different people that usually are on different sides of things, right? But these people are also talking to each other, to other people, etc., in different places. And that's also, how you get information is, of course, to be, at the right place at the right time. You can be in a coffee and then, simply hearing someone talking about your file, but from another perspective or from the information that you were missing, for example. I would recommend for any newcomers in the profession to be careful when you open your laptop of course, on the train, on the bus, on the plane, because this is really, if we have a lot of Francophile here on Twitch or on other platforms, of course, the Thalys is a wonderful source of information. Taking the Thalys back from Brussels to Paris, where people just discuss what they are. The experience during the day, or simply open the laptop and then you have a presentation of the strategy of something that might be of interest for you.
And Catherine, any other tools or services that can be used to stay on top of information?
Well, I think I'll advocate for, the thing through which you contacted me and vice versa, is Twitter is a good source of information for informal and informal thing. I think you can deduct some things from social media, so you might not have the direct information, but you could make links and deduct that, okay, so if he's talking about this, there might be things happening. The press in general is good as source of information, and networking obviously is key, but networking, as Paul is a member of other organizations, we are all members of associations, basically. And I think, although your colleagues might not be working directly on your specific files, they can give you some tips and give you some, for instance, profiles of other of decision makers you may not know, but they could say, oh, I spoke to such commissioner. You might be willing to approach him or her because she has a keen interest into that, and you would not necessarily think of her immediately. But because this person worked with her and gives you the tip. So being members of an association of your field of activity, be it lobbying, be it, I don't know, cigar or tobacco, or in my case, health NGOs, is always an interesting place to be, because you exchange a lot within those organizations. And of course, it's Chatham House rules. So what is discussed within those organizations usually stay within those organizations. So networking is a big part of information sources. And in addition to what Paul said about be careful of what you say in public, whatever the public is, it's the train or in a bar. There are public information at congresses, at conferences, and including for advocacy, and some things that remain between our groups of specialists in our own field of activities. And sometimes you have leaks, and that's something that Paul did not mention, but it's an important part of lobbying.
Okay,
and for the good or the bad.
For the good or the bad, but I mean, leaks have become kind of a science in Brussels. Or if some would even say that it's even communication in itself, leaks. But let's take a bigger picture. So how does what strategy? Let me formulate it better. How does a lobbyist decide the strategy he will adopt to influence policymakers? So let's say you know that the legislation is coming, you want to influence that legislation. So what will lobbyists do to actually, in the end, achieve to change the law?
If the question is geared to me,
to both of you.
Okay. So the public process, yes, the Commission announces that it does a review of existing legislation and wants to update it. The first thing they will do is to run a consultation. So your first step of a lobbying would be to answer the public consultation, and if you're lucky, you have also an expert consultation where the Commission seeks expertise in your field, and so that's a way already to influence, to say, okay, I really want in the next legislation A, B, C, D to be there, and or to be changed but to be adapted. So that's public, by the way. Most of the time the answers are made public, and then the Commission will organize, probably with the help of consultants, one-to-one interviews and experts on different topics as part of the future legislation, workshops, roundtable discussions. Some of them are public, some of them are not public. So there you have another opportunity to influence. Then you could also meet with some desk officers outside for a coffee, from the Commission. Sometimes not, depends on the area. And then it will go through. Then they will publish, based on their different consultations, they will publish a draft that will go to the Parliament. And there you do the same with the Parliament. It goes at Commission level, so with the designated people in charge, which we call rapporteurs and shadow rapporteurs, we will send official position statements, official often political statements, but in our case, at least, with some literature, some backings of what we assert and what we stand for. And then we will seek appointments, and what is said during the appointments or one-to-one appointments is usually with the assistants. You're lucky when you have a direct appointment with the MEP himself or herself. But if the assistant is good, he will present your points to his or her MEP and then ask or suggest a follow-up appointment with the said lobbyist. And then the whole process starts again in plenary. This time you might have the position of the commission of the committee in charge of the file, and then you can send. Usually, it's not secret. Suggested amendments where you think the text is weak or missing some points, and you send appointments. The MEP is free to publish or not publish your position as an NGO, in my case. And then that's how it goes. So there's a part that is oral, a part that is written, a part at the Commission level, part at the Parliament level, and of course, what is the most non-transparent is what happens at the Council level, because we speak to the attachés in charge of the different files. And unfortunately, I would say the attachés or the Council very rarely publish dates of meetings, agendas, and minutes of those meetings where they should be. And I'm saying it for both trade or industry representative as for NGOs, which have non-for-profit. I think it would be beneficial to all transparency, and all those rumors of us, being a lobbyist, being a dirty job, would be probably gone if a lot of minutes would be published. Mm-hmm. So I'm conscious of the fact that I've taken a lot of my time to explain this.
Don't worry, Paul. Let's talk about more the buttons. So Catherine walked us through the whole process and where you can the different stage of influence you can have. But then in terms of strategy, how does a lobbyist decide? Okay, this is the button I'm going to push. This is the button I'm not going to push, or this strategy I'm not going to use, etc., etc. Paul, any views?
I guess it depends on the political pressure on the file. If you look at different, as well, we call it, of course, the political momentum, mm-hmm. right? That it depends, where what's your objective, of course, when there is a legislation, coming up. when there is a legislation coming up, are you trying to support it? Are you trying to, push it back, prevent it, diminish it, etc.? I think that's, of course, first, it's an internal strategy, an internal job to know where you stand compared to the file. And when you talk about strategy, well, it's really about, do you want to accelerate the pressure? Do you want to, highlight a specific point? And then based on that, you have really different tool and different strategy. And, you have also some public event, some catastrophe in the world, some, specific, documentary, some wars happening that will highlight a specific issue. And then based on that, of course, you will need to adapt your strategy completely. And to give you a concrete example, about, not talking necessarily about the war, of course, but if you look at the file on single-use plastic, I think something that really made the click for a lot of people was really this documentary about, turtles being caught in, plastic bags. That was, from a lobbying perspective, that was gold, really. Like the file was done, in a sense that the political momentum was so crushing that one of the most complex directives was adopted super quickly. Because here, really, the machine, the decision-making could not be stopped. Even if you wanted to try to stop it, you would not have been able to do it. So really, you have, when you're a lobbyist, you also need to be a good assessor of the situation in order to adapt. Catherine mentioned it before, the good quality of the lobbyist is to adapt. And unfortunately, that also works both for the messaging and for the strategy.
Mm-hmm. And let's stay with you, Paul. A question that came in the chat is, how did lobbying change or evolve during the pandemic? Was it made easier? Was it made more complicated because you could not go to the coffee to meet people? So how did lobbyists deal with almost 2 years of being stuck inside?
Well, yeah, there was a bit of a mixed mixture, of course, that when we're talking about social gatherings, social life, social networking, well, this was reduced close to zero. There were also some ways, in a sense that you can or you could at one point starting to get a coffee takeaway, so walking in the park, Parc du Cinquantenaire, Parc du Léopold in Brussels, with a friend, with a contact, simply because people were missing each other, as well. But in a sense, it didn't really change too much, in a sense that, the Commission has really for a while now is of course promoting, lobbying, in a sense that by the definition of sending information. So, like a lot of sending of the information was still taking place, whether we're talking about email, whether we're talking about public consultation that are done online. But also for meeting that quickly, really, I must say that a lot of meetings quickly turn online. Now, if we then go into a bit more details, it depends how successful or how efficient lobbying was at that time, depending on the institution. I think for the Commission, honestly, they were very reachable, by phone, by requesting, meeting. They were there. The Parliament was slightly a bit more difficult, I must say, because a lot of people went back home, to their home countries. And, there it really depended on which offices you were, trying to contact, especially trying to reach them out, by phone. The phone was not necessarily connected to the local line in their country. So the Parliament was probably, and that's a bit, ironic to say, because usually the Parliament is one of the most transparent institution that you have, and one of the most open that you can really access. So during COVID, it was not the easiest really to get in touch with people in the Parliament. But as I said, a lot of things went online, both in terms of meetings, WebEx, etc. You get the whole panoply of the different softwares you can use, but also, obviously for social media. For those, of course, entities, associations that were not there, I think it really gave an extra boost for them to invest into social networks and lobbying through social networks.
What about you, Catherine? Was lobbying impacted positively or negatively by COVID, you think?
My experience, which is very linked to, obviously, the field in which I work, which is health, was that there was far less opportunity to advocate, not in a bad sense, but just because the people in charge of health were almost solely focusing on COVID-19. So if you had other topics to bring to the table, they would have to wait. So they waited, simply because they didn't have enough time. So the impact was more on no lobbying rather than different lobbying. It was no lobbying because the whole sphere was taken up by COVID-19, and in the case of the Parliament, a lot by cancer beating plan and the cancer mission. So if your field of activity was not directly related to those two diseases, then you had very little opportunities to interact with EU decision makers in general.
Mm-hmm.
So other than that, as Paul said, there was always, the Commission made itself quite reachable, in the sense that you had mobile phone numbers of your desk officers or your policy officers where you wouldn't normally, and also they everybody understood that we knew nothing about COVID-19, for instance, and related activities, as in preparedness, crisis preparation, and stuff like that. So they sought a lot of expertise. So they turned back to NGOs, at least in my field, a lot to ask for information. What do you know? What are your experts saying? And in contingency planning, as well on health systems in general, as well as on COVID-19 per se itself. So in a way that helped establish a long-term trust relationship, as in if you could provide sound information, then they trust you. Mm-hmm. And then they turn back to you again for other information if you're an expert in that field as well, obviously. But it showed, some trust in the relationship that was very much needed, as in we're not just lobbying for the purpose of lobbying. It's mm-hmm. because we have the knowledge behind, and we're happy to share it with you. So you had some phone calls at 8 o'clock in the evening, where in the past, everybody was shut at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and that was it. But because of the urgency of the situation, that's another change in lobbying.
Okay. Let's stay with you, Catherine, and this time let's enter into the more controversial part of lobbying. Yes. Let's say the myth. Often when you hear about lobbying is when you oppose NGOs in, let's say, corporate lobbies, it's often portrayed as a David versus Goliath kind of fight. So are NGOs really outpowered in Brussels, or is it a myth?
No, okay. They are. They are, because our funding system relies on, let's say, three main streams. One is membership dues, and at least in the field of health, they cannot be high. If you represent patients, you cannot ask a patient for more than 50 euros a year, as a membership dues, as an individual. Then, you have different types of memberships. You have institutional and individual memberships. So membership dues. Second is public funding. So you ask for at national or pan-European level for grants or for project funding. And thirdly, through events. So you might have congresses or conferences that generate some revenues. But with COVID-19,
you didn't have those, or less.
You didn't really have these because it was difficult to ask a fee for attending online. So I can only speak for my field, because I don't know about other NGOs but in my field, it's definitely David against Goliath, because I've run several associations in the health sector. It was rare that we were more than 3 or 4 staff members. And in addition to this, you have very little money to pay for consultants. So outside consultants, as Paul mentioned, that would do your monitoring and your lobbying. And in front of us, you have the Philip Morris people that have staff of, 20 plus. So we don't have that kind of resources. Usually our budgets are around 300 to 400 Ks a year when you look, and that's all, what I'm sharing with you is not secret because it's all in a transparency register, so you can check all this. And so, yes, we don't have the same resources. So it's not a myth, at least in my field of work. I cannot speak about, transport or energy or, any other field of work.
What about you, Paul? Do you think there is really a disproportion in terms of power, like beyond the financing? Is there a disproportion of power between NGOs and non-NGOs actors, let's say?
Yeah, no, that's indeed. I think that's where I would nuance what indeed what Catherine said is that there is definitely, and I think without a doubt, a disproportionate or an unbalance in terms of funding and in terms of money and resources. But then let's define what is power, of course, and the currency. I mean the currency by that, the power of a messaging that is sent from a trade association compared, for example, to an NGO might be very different. And taking a field that I don't work in, and I think the best example is definitely big tech. Big tech, this is really wonderful to see what's happening, just in terms of if you look to the telescope of or the microscope of lobbying, that you have indeed those massive lobbying campaign going on, where you see that a lot of the requests coming from the big techs are not going through the European Commission. They are not budging, and the same from the European Parliament. When you see a lot of the key outcomes of the legislation, you can't say that that Google got its own way or Facebook got its own way with the different acts that were adopted recently. So it's in between. I think that indeed for a lot of years, and especially in the 90s, and that's why of course the European Commission started funding as well NGOs, because there was a need, really a need to rebalance these let's call them two sides of the coin, right? NGOs and trade association, even though of course they might be a bit bit of a mixed. But as Catherine said, and I think that is really fundamental when you do lobbying, and I can't agree more. If you are an association or a personal lobbyist, a self-employed lobbyist, your best currency is the trust that the decision maker has in terms of the integrity of your information, right? So if you are not, fully transparent with the information that you are communicated, or if, the information that you've been sending were completely, false, wrong, fraudulent, then you lose credibility. And I think, a lot of actors, a lot of private actors have lost a lot of credibility towards some decision makers that decide to not take their advocacy into account anymore, simply put. And I think that we see now this rebalance where the smaller the David has a much better let's say currency, or in terms of value of the quality of the information than than Goliath, for example.
And let's stay with you, Paul. In terms of so lobbying comes with in different shapes and form, NGOs, trade association, consultancies, etc., etc. So, well, how does the structure you belong to influence the tools that you're able to use to influence and ultimately gain political power? For instance, are there tools that an NGO is not allowed, but able to use that, let's say, a company would not be able to use, and vice versa?
Well, yes and no, of course. It's a bit of a mix, because you have to be a bit more nuanced. If you're talking about, for example, a multinational that is then on the stock exchange, that in terms of advocacy, you will have a lot of, especially in terms of communication, that will need to go through legal counsel. And we were talking with Catherine before about short appropriate messages. If you let 100% the lawyers deal with your messages, that your message needs to go through, right? It needs to go through someone that has no specific expertise. Then you can't have the lawyers running it. And unfortunately, you'll see that, of course, with multinational and in big trade association, where you have a lot of multinational or a lot of companies that rely on their legal affairs professionals, then it kind of diminish the message. But it's not so much that they can't use it, per se. They could use it, but they just don't use it the way they could. And that's the difference with NGOs that don't necessarily have, for different reasons. Of course, they have members, but the shareholders might react differently for multinational. So again, it's not so much that NGOs have different tools that companies don't. It's just they don't want to use to scare or etc. But that might makes it a bit different in terms of efficiency of the message. And you can see it, of course, from social media as well. You are a bit more free. The smaller the association is, doesn't matter if it's a trade association or an NGOs. But the bigger you are, the more, let's say, neutral your messages is, or a bit more targeted, or even a bit more technical your messages.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Catherine? What do you think about that?
Maybe not focusing so much on the tools and what are the do's and the don'ts, but more on the messengers in our field of work. I'll give you the example, lobbying is touchy with the pharmaceutical industry. Let's put it this way, because the pharmaceutical industry has already a terrible reputation for whatever good or bad reason. And so if you have a patient that comes to an MEP and say, I need this drug to be, reimbursed because I have a rare disease and that's the only drug that would save me. If you dig into it and you see that this person has been fully funded, or his organization is fully funded by one company, for instance, and the medicine he or she is advocating for happens to be from that same company, you're automatically suspicious. Sadly, for that patient who might genuinely be in need of that drug and advocating for himself and not at all representing the interests of that said company. So it's about the messenger. Is that coherent to send this patient to this MEP, or would it be better if it were an overall NGO of rare diseases, for instance, or of healthcare professionals specialists in that rare disease? So the tools are different, but also you need to be cautious about who you send to lobby, because there will automatically be a suspicion. Is he or she representing his genuine interest, or does he have a hidden agenda?
Mm-hmm. And let's stay with you, Catherine. Lobbying, like I mentioned, and we discussed that already, as let's be honest, a bad reputation. It has a bad image in the public eye, and that's actually a question, more remark that I got from people online in preparation of the interview. They say, oh, well, lobbying is a practice opposite to democracy. They represent a vocal minority, and their tool is about applying pressure outside the common practice of voting. So what would you say is the place of lobbying in the democracy? Is it compatible with democracy, and what is its place in democracy?
I think lobbying is essential. I mean, if you have a message and if you want to convey it, better leave it to professionals, and with some ground support. But if you believe in a cause that you really want to support, and most of them are dramatic. I'm not only speaking about a tiny little thing, but you need people to raise your own voice at the highest level of decision making. And since you cannot do it yourself, sometimes individually, you need professionals to do it for you. Professionals that you trust will be able to translate your message in a way that decision makers can hear and listen to, and in a professional way, i.e. fair. And nowadays when I started 20 years ago, it wasn't probably the case, but it's more and more transparent. So you have ways of checking if what has been said is true to the matter, true to what you've said yourself. And if it's not, then who is accountable, basically. So indeed, lobbying has a bad reputation, but I think what lobbying covers in general is really, as we said at the very beginning, how to share the information in a scientific and political manner so that you obtain the best, in my case, for in the field of public health, you know, and the outcome suits your constituents' requests, and it shouldn't be dirty or bad reputation if it's done in full transparency.
What about you, Paul? What do you think about the compatibility of lobbying and democracy?
No, I do honestly think indeed that it's fully compatible. I mean, the democracy in the sense that the part that probably people think about lobbying is undue influence, right? I think that part that stick, and that's where of course that shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't have undue influence, and unfortunately all the cases of lobbying, of course, that goes in the media are very often, of course, the one that were done in a dirty way, in a dirty manner, asking, for example, I don't know, a CEO asking a favor from a minister that he knows, etc. That's if it's not done properly, as Catherine say, in an untransparent manner, that's when, one, you have suspicion, and two, it's not also fair for all the other players that are around there to also advocate and make their voice heard. So in a democracy is, of course, every single voice counts. So of course it's not so much that like one constituent is less than the others, but lobbying actually allows and Catherine mentioned it as well, that we tend to think that decision makers know necessarily everything that's happening. That's not the case, obviously, and then to give a concrete example, if you look at the ENVI committee in the European Parliament, the ENVI committee is the committee that is both in charge of environmental matters and health matters. The people that are going there, they're not all doctors, first of all. They're not all doctors, and they're not all engineers. They're not, they're not environmentalists. They're not specialists about, the environment. So of course, like you need to be able to go talk to them, explain to them, cases or circumstances that they might not be aware of. And as Catherine said, that more and more now, there are tools to allow for these path of communication to be done transparently. So then if you have a suspicion of a case of lobbying or from a sectors that you have a suspicion that is not doing things properly, you do have ways to check what was the messages, if one, the messages was correct, and two, clearly what was said at what time, also during the decision-making process.
And let's stay with you, Paul. We've been dancing a bit around it. It's the idea of ethics for lobbying. So what is the ethic of a lobbyist? What is considered like bad practice or even illegal when it comes to lobbying?
Well, we have to separate, of course, ethics from what's illegal, because what's illegal is, definitely not ethical. So, of course, again, I would say it, right there, of course, corruption is illegal. And I think that's when, I give a lot of speeches about, lobbying, that's something that, must be said from the start, that as lobbyists, we have code of conduct, so, from the transparency register, you can have your own code of conduct, but you also have the law. And I think that should be said. And the law is also there to protect against, illegal activities. But in terms of, ethics, then indeed, you have how you conduct yourself in your daily matter. Are you trying to get information, trying to subdue information from someone in an improper way? For example, that's, that's one way that it's not, ethical in a sense. If you ask for information and you're transparent about your request to that person, say, why do you want the information? And the person is willingly giving you the information, then that's, ethical, lobbying. If you're trying to force or coerce that person to get the information one way or another, that's not ethical. So it's about, not necessarily, it's about how you conduct yourself when you do, lobbying, what kind of practice you do. It could also be, and that depends also on individuals. But for me, I would never dare, for example, to send to a contact, a message, after certain hours, especially if I know that these people, have families. That's one, like I'm a father myself. I'm a father, so I know that. How do you call it? That there are also some precious times that you need to separate professionals and personal life. That's one. And as well is how you approach people, and also what kind of message you send as well. Do you truly believe in, when you're sending some messages or some communication to the decision makers, are you truly believing in what you're saying? And I think that's more a personal reflection than something to be said for all lobbyists. But ethical lobbying is also like, are you okay with yourself, with what you're advocating, with what you're saying?
What about you, Catherine? What's your take on the ethic of a lobbyist?
I think it's very important that we all go by a code of conduct. And that code of conduct should be rather specific. And there are do's and don'ts in lobbying that are very clear. For instance, do not pretend that you are who you're not. Like, do not pretend that you're going to talk to this person as a friend, when in reality you are really trying to extract some information. Be open, and reveal your agenda. And do not lie. Do not lie. Do not pretend to have a piece of information just to get another one when it's not true. So that might have been, the old tricks of old lobbyists, but nowadays we don't do that. If you meet with someone, state clearly who you are, maybe who you represent, and sometimes who funds you, to be very clear. And then you can start an open conversation, because I think people are far more at ease speaking to you when they know you're open about who you are and what you're doing and what you truly believe in. If you're from the tobacco industry, do not pretend that you're representing patients who have lung cancer. Just say, I am working for XYZ. It's about, again, going back to what I said on a relationship with the commission, it's about trust. You can have a very honest and open conversation about a matter that matters to you only if you're true, if you're sincere, and if you're not hiding or lying. Mm-hmm. Because people will find out.
And let's stay with you, Catherine. We mentioned it several times. There are rules at EU level on transparency for lobbying. We mentioned the transparency register. Do you think that the rules currently in place at EU level for transparency and, let's say, generally speaking, providing a framework for the activity of lobbying is good? Is it good enough or not?
It's not sufficient. But having seen the progress in the 20 years or so I've been around, I think it's already not a bad start. It's a pity it's not applicable for all institutions. As I mentioned before, the fact that the council meetings are really secret, but both with lobbyists and as internal, when they have trilogues, and we don't have the minutes of those meetings. So there's a lot of progress to be done. Also, the edited versions of the documents, when you have access to documents, when you ask for minutes and you see everything is struck out by the commission, is nonsense, and we've seen it when we ask for information about the vaccine deals, and the commission says sure, and then sends you a document where everything is in black. So like everything else in the EU institution, it will need improvement. And sadly, it takes time to improve at the EU level, unless you have a shock such as COVID-19 or Ukraine war, where all of a sudden things progress very rapidly in certain fields. So we might need yet another scandal in lobbying to see some progress. I don't know, but I'd say it's better than nothing.
What about you, Paul? What's your take on current transparency in the EU?
Well, I think, of course, when you look at what exists at the national level, you can be happy that, of course, there is a framework, at least at the EU level. But frankly, the framework could be better. Could indeed be better. I think that honestly, the institution really missed the opportunity when they were recently renegotiating the interinstitutional agreements. So that's a common agreement between institutions about let's call them the ground rules of the transparency register and actually the lobbying framework. And here they really miss the opportunity, and I'm much more focusing here on the Parliament and the Council, of making it mandatory really for any lobbyist or people that wants to influence, to be even more correct, to be registered on the transparency register. Because the transparency register, is this, as its name suggests, it's a database where you voluntarily, of course, disclose information about, funding, about who is representing you, or, if you're a consultant, who are your clients, etc. And, that, of course, the fact that some institutions do not apply this strict, what you call conditionality, of course, will create and creates loophole that, will be, obviously as loophole, and Catherine, you have legal background as well, loopholes are meant to be used, unfortunately. And here the interinstitutional agreement literally creates loophole. So, maybe indeed there is a revision that will be coming, or a review, as we call it in the EU jargon, this summer about that mandatory transparency register. But I think we can do better. We can do better in terms of also, as I said before, the information exists. We just need to make sure it's connected. So that could really be, like the different meetings, of course, of people, of MEPs with, lobbyists. That could be about the number of times a lobbyist has access to European Parliament, for example. This is an information that I'm sure is not difficult to get. It just needs to be connected. So all of that, is possible, but we lack well, I was explaining at the beginning, the political momentum for it. So, let's see what the future brings, but it's there, but we could certainly do better.
All right, I'm looking at the time, so I will have one final question for you two, and then you will be free, finally. So Catherine, and Paul as well, lobbying has a bad reputation. What would you do to give it a better light? Tell citizens, well, lobbying is not actually such a bad thing.
I think we're all lobbyists in our own ways. If you need to convince, I don't know, your partner that you need a new sofa, you need a strategy to get that new sofa if your partner is not convinced, and so you have to picture it at a bigger level and for bigger causes. But I think we need to be more articulate on what lobbying is and why it is needed. Us NGOs prefer using the word advocate. I know it's a bit of a joke around the EU bubble, between, lobby is a dirty word and advocate is the clean version of it. But it's true. I think I much prefer the word advocate because it's exactly what we're doing. We're advocating for something we believe in, and everybody does it one way or the other at their own level. When you were a student and we were marching in the streets for more equality, for something like that, you were already a campaigner. Yeah, that's another term, a campaigner and an advocate. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. And as long as you're faithful to yourself, faithful to your cause, and you do it in a clean, proper and transparent manner.
What about you, Paul? What would you do, or what you wish would be done to make lobbying a more popular kind of profession?
Well, I think making it more popular would be difficult.
Yeah.
Let's say to be the popular or the job that people will do. I think it will take really a while. But no, I think this kind of exercise that we have now, and I think that with different lobbyists, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to communicate and to explain what we're doing, and what we're doing is not so different indeed of what you might do in your personal life in one way or another. Or, if you take it another way, when you look at politicians are lobbyists for their constituents, right? So it's really how you frame it. Lobbying is just that. It's really that you're there to represent a cause, interest, members, or the company you work for. But, that it's not so different about, other things that that are happening on a daily life. You voting for a certain cause that you believe one way or another, you are influencing the decision-making process by casting a vote, right? So lobbying is just an extra, layer that goes on top of that, of the decision-making process. So, how to make, lobbying more popular is, of course, to talk more about lobbying, to diffuse the kind of like the myth or debunks the, what exists around, but also to simply have transparency around it. And I think, honestly, that's the most important. That's also going out in the media. We know that it's catchy. It's always catchy that you put lobbying in a media article because you get always the connotation you want for. But just go out there, explain what lobbying is about, or even when there is lobby ongoing, for that specific lobbyist to explain what they're doing. But I think that sometimes people tend to forget why. To go back to the basics and say, why you're doing this? Well, I'm doing this to, for this cause, for that. So communicating in a more transparent manner.
All right, that's very clear. So, Paul, Catherine, thank you very much, both of you, for taking the time to answer our questions tonight. Chat, make sure to thank both of our guests. Stay with us because we're going to do the debriefing. Paul, Catherine, I wish you, both of you, a very good evening, and maybe I will see you another time on the channel.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
All right, so let's start the debriefing. So tell me everything what you thought about the interview and all that. I want to hear everything. Actually, let's switch to the next thing I wanted to show you. First, let me close Zoom. There we go. All right. So very interesting. I really enjoyed it. It was very matter of fact, and it was. I was surprised at some of the things that was said, not in the sense that they were shocked by the information, but I didn't think that they would be so. They would agree on so much. But it was quite interesting about it, especially since like I mentioned in introduction, they both come from very different background. I mean, Catherine comes from a health NGO kind of background. Paul, on the side of being a director of the lobby of lobbying, he's also the director for tobacco industry. So they're not necessarily supposed to be in the same on the same side. But yeah, before I go into the notes I taken and also the comments that you made, like I saw the last two comments you made, I Get Up and Myth, I will come back on those in a moment. Just wanted to show you a couple of documents that I gathered for you as a preparation. So what you see here on screen is actually, so Article 11, it's part of the EU treaties. So let's say the constitution of the European Union. There is actually an article that gives a legal foundation to lobbying, and specifically the first two paragraphs. So the fact that the institution shall give citizens, but also representative associations, the opportunity to exchange their views in all areas of union action. So it means that by law, by treaty, the EU has to allow the public, external actors, to give, to interact and to influence what the EU is going to be doing. And from there, that leads to the fact that the EU became one of the biggest lobbying body. But let's not kid ourselves. Even if this article had not been in the treaties, it would still have happened. It's something as huge as that. Of course, there's going to be lobbying, just like there's lobbying at the UN, just as there's lobbying everywhere. But at least it makes it open, and it gives then it gave the legal basis to then, okay, we have the obligation to organize, to allow citizens and representative association to give us feedback. So we have to organize that so that it's transparent. And that's how we go. You get the code of conduct. That's how you get the transparency registers, etc., etc. Is the public able to privately meet lawmakers like lobbyists do, though? Well, yes, that's what constituency are for. As an ex assistant to an MEP, and that's the same for national MPs, they have constituency, they have an office constituency. So like in the parliament, you have 1 week per month where MEPs, it's called the constituency week, the green week, where MEPs can go back to their constituency and they have an office there and they take meetings with the public. So yeah, I mean, the public has the ability to an extent to meet privately some lawmakers to say, okay, this is my concerns or this is the problem in my constituency. And when MEPs also go out in the field, like they go visit this or that farm company or whatever, they will meet constituents and the constituent will tell me, well, this is my problem, this is what I want you to fix. And then the MEP will be like, okay, I get this feedback, what do I do with it? So to an extent, yeah, there is an opportunity for the public to meet the lawmakers and make the lobbyists have 1 week only as well. No, lobbyists, it's to an extent. I mean, I'm trying to think on that. Yeah, lobbying happens all the time for sure. But like they mentioned in the interview, actually, it's very hard for a lobbyist to get a meeting with an MEP. Usually, you will meet the staff, and I mean, I've been like I mentioned, I've been on both sides of the table. I've met lobbyists. I knew from the get-go that, to be honest, I didn't care about what they were telling me. I was just meeting them out of courtesy. I knew that my MEP was not going to do anything about it, or I would not agree with what the lobbyists are saying, and so I listened politely to what the lobbyists were telling me for 30 minutes or something, and then I say, okay, well, thank you, we'll stay in touch, and we never stayed in touch. So, and the job of an assistant is also to protect his MEP. So, I mean, in my case, for lobbyists to meet my MEP, he would have to go over my dead body if I didn't want the lobbyist to meet the MEP. So actually, yeah, lobbyists is not like the image that often people can have, that they walk in the office as if it was their own office, or they go to the coffee and just check the MEP and so on. Oh, let's you have 5 minutes. Let's talk. It's not necessarily like that. You can have that to an extent. Like some after a while, if you build trust, and sometimes when you have MEPs that align with some lobby, and when I just a clarification, when I talk about lobby, I talk about lobby in the wider sense of the term. So for me, when I talk about lobby, I talk the private company, just that I talk the NGO. For me, I put them both under the term lobby. So yeah, you can have an MEP that is more aligned with a lobby or an NGO, and so yeah, he will have friendly relationship with those, but he will not have the same relationship with a lobby he doesn't agree with, and that's normal. So yeah, I mean, of course, lobbyists are part of the job of MEPs, but I wouldn't say that lobbyists have an open door policy that they can do come whenever they want, do whatever they want in EU policy. That's simply not the case. And it's actually, I mean, also on the side of someone who is now a lobbyist, I can tell you that it's hard actually to get meetings, even sometimes with the assistants, because they have 10,000 things to do, and that's something I will come back to when I cover the notes I taken, because you have too much things to do. And so as a lobbyist, you need to come for information, but you also need to have the opportunity to give the information in the first place, and that's hard. That's a job in itself. So yeah, it's not as simple as it may seem. But yeah, going back quickly on that, the other thing I wanted to show you, and I need to readjust my screen for that, so bear with me for a sec. There you go. That's the so-called transparency register. So that's a public website. Actually, I'm going to give you right now the link. There you go. So that's the official place where lobbies register voluntarily to and say, okay, this is who we are, this is our budget. So let's see here, it's completely public. Huh? You can do search. Let's see, like the latest one who has, so that seems German. So let's take this one. It's English. So see, this one just registered in the register. So it's Continental 7 Spa. He gives you, so he gives them a number. It says what it is. So in this case, it's a company. Gives you the website. It gives you the address, the country they come from. They tell you who are the people, who are the lobbyists in there. It tells you what is the purpose of the lobby, what are the field of interest. So you see that right now this new lobby is mostly focused on one specific EU legislation. you have the list of meetings that they can have with the European Commission, if any, what consultation they answer to. So you have a whole list of things. You have the number of people, you have the budgets, you have the number of people who are accredited in the parliament. So you have all a very wide bunch of information that lobbies are, let's say, supposed to include in this. So it's like it was mentioned in the conversation. It's for now it's voluntary. So that means it's not mandatory for a lobby to be in this transparency register. But there's a lot. Let's see. So as of today, there are more than 11,000, almost 12,000 entities in the transparency register. It's not complete. It's not the full scale of lobbyists, but that's quite a lot. And why are lobbyists incited to actually register in this the transparency register? Is because it actually gives them a number of opportunity. Because, for instance, if you want to meet people in the commission actually does not, especially at higher level, if you want to meet a director, a head of unit, a director, or even the commissioner, they will not meet you if you're not part of the transparency register. It's forbidden for them to meet you if you're not part of the transparency register. So obviously, as a lobby, you want to have the opportunity to meet high-level people in the commission, because that's where decisions are taken. So you will register in there. Same thing in the parliament. You want to be part of hearings, that sort of thing. You need to be in the transparency register. Also, the thing that it allows you to do is that it gives you access to the premise. When you are registered on the transparency register, you have the ability to have a badge, meaning that you will not have to beg an assistant or an MP. I want to come to the parliament. Can you please give me an accreditation so that I can enter the building? No, you will have your badge, which is a brown badge, with your name, with all the information in there, and you can enter in the parliament and do your meetings, etc. as you need to. So you have an incentive. However, where there is the limit of the exercise is, like I mentioned, the two institutions that, let's say, are playing the game quite keenly is the Parliament and the European Commission, which leaves the Council. The Council is the body that represents the member state. And like it was mentioned by both the guests, the Council is a black box. It's a complete black box, and the Council actually has been refusing to make the transparency register mandatory. So that's, for instance, it'd be mandatory for lobbyists who want to interact with the council to be on the register or to have the publication of the meetings. Why is that? Because traditionally, a council considers itself as a diplomatic body, not as a political body. And so they say, well, it's diplomacy is secret, is the foreign affairs of the country, so it falls outside the remit of lobbying. It's not lobbying that we're doing diplomacy. And so we should not fall in it. And also because it's an occasion, they don't like to see the public eye, they want to do their own business there. But council has always been very, very, very resistant to the transparency register, despite the pressure of both institutions. This register, it's an invention of the commission back in the 90s, end of 90s, and then it was joined by the parliament. But yeah, and again, this is completely public. You can search whatever and see. Let's see. Let's look at Google. Let's see what's the Google. There we go. So what's the transparency register of Google? They're registered. So let's say companies and groups. You have the address in California. You have the address here in Belgium. You have the identity of the people who are in charge of it. What are the remits? So I will pass on that. So here you have all the policy things that they care about, that they work on, which is a lot. It goes from DSA, DMA, copyright, economic policy, hate speech. There must be competition law in there somewhere, artificial intelligence. So quite a lot. You have a whole list of meetings that they had with the European Commission. All the consultation they answered lately, the contribution to roadmaps and all that. Number of people. They have 25 people in there. I'm trying number of people involved. 75%, 50%. So they have a bunch of part-time people, if I understand. But yeah, still 25 people in the team. So you have all the list of people who are there. Yes, interesting. This is the list of all the organizations that Google is part of, because it's something that was mentioned by Catherine at some point, is that all lobbies are actually part of other lobbies, because there is strength in number. So Google is not only lobbying as itself, it's also part of other organizations that will collectively represent, let's say, the interest of more tech companies. So that will be Digital Europe, for instance, or there must be .Europe somewhere. Let's see, Edima. That's Edima. They didn't change the name, but still, they belong to other organizations. That, for instance, in the let's say in Edima, they will be lobbying alongside some of their competitors. They will be lobbying with Microsoft. They'll be lobbying with Amazon, etc. Because they have in certain field common interest, and so they will work collectively. And I'm sure, like, it's a bit of a Russian doll. You see, like right now we're seeing the page of Google, but Digital Europe will have its own page. So if we go on the Transparency Register of Digital Europe, you will see all the information for Digital Europe, who may itself be part of other organization. And so up you can see all the layers. You see all the networks that they are part of, that they sponsor. So they give money to Euractiv, for instance. They give money to Friends of Europe, that sort of thing. Politico. So it gives an idea of where the money, where the resources of the body goes. So it gives a bunch of the financial data. So you know that they have a contract with FTI Consulting, which is a consulting company, for between 50 and 100,000 euro. Intermediaries. Let's see the budget. Estimated budget between 6 million and 6.5 million euro a year. So it gives already a lot of information, which is very interesting to analyze, and gives you an idea of sometimes the strength. Because let's say, so we have Google right now. Let's take an NGO. Let's say Greenpeace, a big NGO. Oh, come on, thing. I'm being sabotaged. Return to... Okay, let's see. Greenpeace. Greenpeace European Unit. So let's see the number of people. So see lots of communication, meetings, etc. Up. Unofficial grouping. Okay. So they have 15 people. So that's barely, I would say, 10 less people than Google. And to be honest, like 15 people, it's a lot more than the huge majority of lobbies in Brussels. So it's a very big organization, Greenpeace in Brussels. Let's see total budget. I see a little less than 2 million. Yeah, a little less than 2 million in terms of budget. So 2 million versus 6.5 million euro. Even if, like, Google is probably an extreme case. It's probably one of the richest, if not the richest, lobby in Brussels. So don't think that all lobbies in Brussels have a budget of 6.5 million euros. That's simply not the case. But anyway, Transparency Register, a very interesting tool. Don't hesitate to go there. I'm rambling, but of course, if you have questions or comments, do tell me. In the meantime, what I will do... 2 million is also a lot. Yeah, 2 million euros is a fuck ton of money. That's for sure. I'm not implying that it's penny. Like I mentioned, they have much more resources than a wide majority of lobbies. Anyway, now I'm going to my notes. So they said that you become lobbyist by accident, which is true. I mean, I became lobbyist by accident. Well, no, but not necessarily by accident, but yeah, no, but by accident, I would say as well. I didn't say when I was 10 I want to be a lobbyist. I didn't study. I didn't went to lobbying school or whatever. I just became a lobbyist. That's just how it happened. So the important thing about the definition of lobbying is that it's not only direct influence, but also indirect influence. The fact that that doesn't mean that you're lobbying only when you go talk to an MEP or to a commissioner, but you're also lobbying when you're working with other associations to build a strategy, even without talking directly to the MEP or to the commissioner. That's also lobbying, and a lot of things can fall under that. I like the idea that the job of lobbying is sending information, because it's a lot. That's something that they emphasize on. Is the idea of you MEPs, institutions are not experts. Well, they can build expertise, but they are not like they don't know everything in life. So the role of lobbies, whatever lobby, is to provide additional information. Of course, with a bit of an interest, whether on a lobby or on the NGO side, they all have an interest. But it's something that you keep in mind when you are on the other side of the table. You know that people don't come to see you just out of the kindness of their heart. They have something they have an interest in this. So that's something that you know perfectly. And as long as it's known, well, there's no problem with it. But it's about informing who is able to inform MEPs to get the right information at the right time, and to convince people that this information is good and should be acted on. And the problem it brought, not the problem, but the challenge, and I think it's Paul who said that, I'm not sure, but at some point he said, yeah, contrary to the common belief, Brussels is not an opaque city. It's not something where you don't have information. It's the contrary. You have way too much information, and the challenge, especially when you are on the MEP side, on the political side, is that you're literally drowning in information. You receive countless information, whether it's through news, whether it's through emails, campaigning, citizens, etc. So you're just flooded with information, and the role of an assistant, the role of an MEP, is to then pick into this mass of information and decide, okay, this is what I choose to take home for my own work. And the challenge for an MEP, for a lobby will be to be in to get the attention of the MEP or the political the policymaker, to make sure that it's your information that will click and that will be taken home. And also on the side of the lobby, it's to an extent to get information, because when you're an assistant, when you work for an MEP, you're the target. So you have no struggle. Like, if you know what information you want to find, you can find it, because everything is sent to you. You get all the agendas, you know everything that's happening, all the events. So if you're trained to be good at this kind of job, you are able to have a global picture of what's happening around you. You know that, okay, there's this event happening, there's this person doing this, there's this person saying that, etc. On the lobbyist side, it's not necessarily as easy, because for the most part, you're sending information, you're not necessarily receiving it, so you don't necessarily have this global. It's more difficult for you to have this global picture, because you don't know what event is taking place at the same time, what is the thing that is gathering political momentum in the institution. And so part of the job of a lobbyist is sending information, of course, but also to gather information, to understand a bit better the context you're in, because like it was mentioned by Paul, context is also everything. You have to change the kind of information that you give to policymakers. You would have to adapt depending on the context. So he mentioned, for instance, the directive on plastic bag. And he said, yeah, after the publication of the documentary where you could see turtles suffocating with plastic bag, the directive became unstoppable, because the political context was there, and there was no way in hell you could do anything against that. And so, as a lobbyist, you want to have a flair. You want to be able to sense where the political wind is moving, and so that's how that will play into your strategy. Because you can say, okay, this, maybe I have a chance to change it, I have a chance to stop it. But on the other side, under different political circumstances, you will say, no, this is completely impossible to stop, and then I need to change my strategy. That means I will, rather than trying to stop it, I will try to introduce safeguards to change a bit the direction, so that it's not damaging or too damaging for me, or for whatever interest I represent. So it's about being able to learn, to read into the political tea leaves, so to say. What else? I see the time is passing, so I'll try to go quick, even if I could speak about this topic for hours. It's one of my pet peeve, lobbying. Coordination between lobbies, I talked about it. So the association of lobbies, typology of lobbying. So you have, we mentioned it a bit, within the family of lobbying, you can find a lot of different actors. You have what you call the in-house, or a company itself, like let's say Google. Google, it's an in-house lobby. It's the lobby for Google that is doing lobbying for Google only. And then you have trade association, which is the lobby of a economic sector, which is, let's say, all the tech companies we group together. So let's say in EDIMA or in Digital Europe, and they will lobby together on the things that they agree with. Then you have the NGOs, you have the consultants. Consultants, they're basically, I don't want to say mercenaries, but they are companies that rent themselves to other companies or to other lobbies who need their knowledge, to need their know-how. You have think tanks, you have foundations, so you have, under the term lobby, you have a very, 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 very wide range of actors. Each one has specificities. You don't lobby the same way from when you are in an in-house than when you are in a trade association, than when you are an NGO, etc. So it's very different. Okay, let's see. Question: will it be better to provide the MEP with better staff rather than relying on people with conflict interest for information? Well, okay, more qualified people. Okay, I can tell you that as a former assistant, no matter what you do, you will never, ever be able to know it all. As an assistant, as an MEP, you work not only on one topic. If you were working on a single topic, yes, that would be easy because you would just need to hire one specific expert. But the problem is that you work on a ton of different things. As an MEP, you will work on 5-10 different files at the same time, and the political circumstances will make that you will work on other topics. So it's impossible to have staff that knows it all on every single topic. And to an extent, that would be dangerous as well, because if you had politicians who were living in their own ivory towers, convinced that they know better than everyone else, and because they know better than everyone else, they can do whatever they want, that would actually be pretty dangerous democratically. So the role of lobbying is to provide information, to help build expertise, even if you do that with a bit of an interest. But again, the MEP, the assistant, know that there is an interest in there, and the job of an assistant, the job of an MEP is to get this information and build his own opinion. So that means that he will listen to both sides. So let's say you will meet one company, that you will meet the NGO that says the exact contrary, and you will compare arguments, and in the end you will say, okay, well, I'm more convinced by that, or I think that, so I will align with more or less that thing. That doesn't mean that you're taking checks from the lobby or the NGO that you chose to follow, but rather that as a political decision, as a technical decision, you identify more with this side of the debate, and that's how it is. MEPs already have a lot of means, and I mean the budget for an MEP, the annual the budget per month for their staff, it's about 25,000 euros, which is, like, for instance, I can speak about the French. It's more than, I would say, more than twice the budget that a national MP has for his office. So that means that already, if you compare the staff of an MP and the staff of an MEP, the MEP is much more rich to hire staff. That means there are more people. So the office of an MP will be between 2 and 4 people in general. People who are all smart people in general, who are qualified, who acquire technical knowledge. And again, the more you receive information, the more you build expertise. And after a while, well, you become kind of an expert yourself. And that means as well that you become also a bit less reliant on lobbies, because you know the issue, so you know how to read the bullshit. When after 6 years in Parliament, on my topics, if a lobbyist was coming to me and trying to bullshit me, it would take me 30 seconds to figure out, and I would make him regret for trying to waste my time. The issue seems to be too small budget for staff for each MEP. Actually, that's a lot. I mean, 4 assistants, that's quite a lot. 25,000 euro, that's a pretty big sum. Especially since it allows you to have well-paid staff. So no, I don't. I mean, and the parliament is always trying to increase the means, because the model of the parliament has always been the U.S. Congress, where they have like 4 assistants is much. That's actually quite a lot. 4 assistants is actually quite a lot, because you have. I mean, okay, let's reverse it. For you, how many assistants would be fair for an MEP? Let's say it like that. How many assistants would be fair for you? Because 4 assistants, that's, of course, you can always have more, and it depends also on the amount of work that the MEP is doing, but 4 assistants, you can do a lot with it. Really, really a lot. Because you tend to work in only 2 committees, so that means that you have, let's say, 2 main areas of work, and within there, you will probably have an assistant then for communication, etc., etc., but 4 assistants, you can do a lot. Of course, it will never be enough. You could give an MEP 100 assistants. There's always room for more. There's always room for more, because there's always more information, more things you could work on. So it would be endless. But clearly, as someone who was in there, 4 assistants, that's good. That's good. I think an MEP, if he has between 2 and 3 assistants, is able to do a very good job. Especially if he recruits people who are good. That's another matter. But with 2 or 3 assistants, you can do a lot of good job. Maybe it would be better to have a smaller parliament and provide more staff for each MEP. Well, smaller parliament, we have to represent 27 countries, 450 million people. So, I mean, 705 in theory MEPs. I mean, then so yeah, you could on the contrary, you could say that the smaller the parliament, the less democratic it is, because if one MEP represents like X million people, it's less democratically accurate. Like it's less representative than if it were representing a smaller number, meaning that if there were more MEP. But that's a different political debate on the constituencies and all that. But anyway, moving on this, because I really see the time passing. I want to finish. Let me go through this. Plux, I saw Ikaros, you were willing to come to Plux whenever you want. I'm happy to organize that at some point. But yeah, Plux is indeed kind of a go-to, even if like using Plux for lobbying, I don't know, because in Plux, Plux is an after work where assistants and generally speaking people from the bubble go to have a drink and discuss it and all that. That would be weird if someone was coming up to me and say, "Oh well, I want to talk about this file." I'm like, "Fuck off! I'm off duty. I just want to have a drink with my friends." So you know, that would be weird. But I can, you can. It's a place when you can network, you can meet people, etc. On that, I agree. EU institutions and lobbying. So yeah, lobbying is directed towards different institutions, and depending on the institution, you have different kind of lobbying. Commission is very technical lobbying because they are the one drafting the legislation, so they need information to be able to draft the EU legislation. Council, since it's very opaque, it's more political kind of but political like national interest kind of thing. And finally, the parliament is very political, of course, and that's where you have actually the most leeway when you're a lobby, because MEPs can do whatever they want. They don't have to answer to anyone except their constituents, so they can propose whatever the fuck they want. So if you want to change dramatically something, Parliament is the best place to go, and that means that, for instance, you would say that certain institutions favors different kind of lobbies. So lobbies that are able to provide very technical information will be very useful for the Commission, while lobby that are very good at communication will be very good in Parliament, because Parliament is sensitive to communication, to politics. So, for instance, generally speaking, it's considered that the Parliament is the best place for NGOs, because that's where they have the most chance to change things. Council, again, national interest, so you will have the national bodies that will be most efficient in there. Any advice for someone just starting out in the field? Well, advice is pretty easy, so to say. First rule of the game, if you are outside the bubble, try to enter the bubble no matter the means. Try to find an internship. Internship is the best way to find a job in the bubble. So whether in the Parliament, ideally in an institution, if you can find an internship in an institution, I don't want to say golden, but it gives you an advantage. But yeah, first, get an internship in there so that you can get knowledge, learn how the bubble actually works. I learned in the I learned into the most of the things I know today. I learned in the trenches, not because I studied that in university. So, internship, very important to know that. Then you're working there. Any advice? Meet people. Listen to people who've been there for a while. And you got that. You're starting your first lobbying job at the moment. Well, welcome in the bubble. Knowledge. Acquire knowledge. Understand your sector. Understand your the networks. Listen to people who have been around for a while. And then it's as everything you will learn in the trenches. It's a lot like you have to be on top of your understanding how politically the bubble works. If you understand how the bubble works politically, that makes easier to lobby, because part of the lobbying, like they explain, like I explained, is about being able to read the political momentum, knowing where to apply pressure, where to act. There is 705 MPs. You're not going to go see all 705 MPs. You need to identify the one that matters. So that's part of the lobby. A good lobbyist will know who to go see, when to give the right information. That's at the end, whether you Google or the smallest NGOs out there, that's what matters. Anyway, any chance you could meet me during a random PLOC Thursday? I haven't been in PLOCs in a while, but who knows? Yeah, I wouldn't pull it outside the realm of possibility. One day I will organize a drink in Brussels. Who knows? Maybe some people will come to see me and have a drink with me. But yeah, that could be possible. Moving on. Lobby and pandemic, we discussed that already. Finance is different than power. That's something that was quite interesting from Paul, saying that indeed NGOs don't have the same funds as, let's say, individual companies, etc., and create a disproportion. But that doesn't mean that they are powerless, or doesn't mean that the lobby that have the money always win. And he took the example of big tech, like the big tech company, Google, Amazon, etc. They've been they have the biggest lobby around in Brussels by far, and yet they're taking a beating on most policy when it comes to data protection, when it comes to copyright, when it comes to digital rules, competition law. They're taking a beating around. Why? Because the political momentum is against them. And so that's where NGOs or other companies that are way smaller than them, they are able to outperform them in terms of power. Partly because there is the political momentum with them. So indeed, money helps having power, but money doesn't necessarily equal power. Of course, lobbying is essential for democracy. Both of them agree with that. Of course, I agree with that as well. I've said that quite a lot of time. Decision makers do not have absolute knowledge. I already covered that. Something that I also agree. Something Catherine said. We're all lobbyists in our own way, and that's true. Like I mentioned, the idea of lobbying is doing whatever to influence public decision. You going to a protest, going to a manifestation, that's an action of lobbying. You signing a petition online, that's an action of lobbying. Everything can be. generally speaking, everything can be turned into lobbying. So it's not just saying amendments. It's not just meeting MEPs around coffee or whatever. Everything that can have an influence is lobbying. And so at your own level, you can do lobbying. And even if not at EU level, like let's say you're back home, you want something change into your city. You're not happy about like let's say the state of the street. The street is dirty, the street is undone or whatever. You write a letter to your mayor. This is an act of lobbying. Or you send a letter with your neighbors. This is an act of lobbying because you're trying to force or change a political decision, an action. Lobbying is kind of like a commercial NGO. Lobbying is both. Lobbying is imagine lobbying as a toolbox. Lobbying is a tool. It defines what kind of tool you can do to influence. So whether you're NGO, whether you're a trade association, whether you're whatever, lobbying is your toolbox. It's nothing more. So something Catherine said at the end, oh yeah, NGOs like to say that they're not doing lobbying, they're doing advocacy. That's bullshit. I mean, between us. That's and she said that as well, that's kind of the joke in Brussels. That's bullshit. Lobbying and advocacy is the same. It's just advocacy is trying to give a moral dimension to lobbying to try to differentiate themselves from the other. But ultimately, you're a lobbyist. If I caricature, you're working for Monsanto, you're working for Greenpeace. In pure technical term, what you're doing is the same. Lobbying is a technical tool. Then you can, of course, say what one side is doing is better than the other, but still, on the pure technical level, in terms of tool, you're both doing lobbying, and lobbying is a toolbox. So that's different. So that's the same thing. Is political activity in the party a plus, or can it be read sometimes? Can it compromise one's application for a role in the EU bubble, especially in the private sector? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It's a plus or not a plus. I mean, what matters is as long as what you're doing does not conflict with the activity of what you're doing in the bubble, that's fine. I mean, in the end, you have to talk to everyone. I used to work in the parliament. I'm a lobbyist now. When I'm doing my job as a lobbyist, I'm not only talking to people who were in my political group. I talk to everyone, and to an extent, I mean, you have to talk to everyone, including people that politically, personally, I disagree with. But that's part of my job. So I will work with people who have maybe a different political tendency. But who gives a shit about that? What matters is that you're supposed to talk to everyone. As long as you don't make it doesn't become a problem for your employer. Of course, that's a different thing. But well, long story short, it depends. It's not an obligation. It's not necessarily a problem, but it depends on the context. Anyway, I've been already over talking about that. Like I mentioned, I could talk about the topic for hours, but yeah. Let's finish there. So I hope that you enjoyed the interview and my ranting on the topic. I hope I did that well. So of course I welcome your feedback here on Discord on whether you like the way I deal with the topic, because I know that lobbying is a pretty complicated and sensitive topic. I hope that you learn stuff. As always, if you like what you saw, you can subscribe. Follow. Sorry, I not yet subscribe. You can follow the channel here, but also on my other social media, Twitter, Discord, YouTube, all the good things. So you just have to click the link and you have all that. If you feel especially generous, you can even toss a coin to your streamer via Coffee. You have the link in there as well. And as for the rest of the week, tomorrow we're having another interview with an MEP, this time a Slovak EPP MEP, Ivan Stefanek, tomorrow at 8:30, and on Sunday the news review at 6 in French and at 8 in English. So on this, I wish you all a good evening, and I hope to see you tomorrow and later this week. Bye everyone.